It is the Monday, November 17 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. I am your host, Ari Meirov. Week 11 of the NFL season officially wraps up tonight with the Dallas Cowboys and the Las Vegas Raiders. A very, very entertaining Sunday around the NFL. A bunch of back and forth games, a bunch of close games, a bunch of nail biting games. And the NFL playoff picture is definitely getting clearer here, especially in the AFC after that Broncos win over the Kansas City Chiefs. Very, very interesting stuff unfolding there in the AFC. We'll get to all of it here on the show today, but we're going to start with some big news involving one of the biggest names in the NFL. Let me bring in my good friend Ben Allen. What's going on, my friend? How are you?
Hey, am I the big name in the NFL? Is that why you tossed to me that way? You're one of the biggest names in the NFL, Ben Allen? Is that what you were doing there?
Maybe. I mean, should we say that? I don't know. But
Let's just
Ben
get to
is
this. We can just get to the story. We can get to the story. The real biggest guy. Okay. And you're talking about playoff pictures being clear. I think it's safe to say that barring one of the most spectacular comebacks ever, Cincinnati Bengals may be out of the playoff picture for good at this point. We'll see what happens with Joe Burrow if he comes back. You still have that sliver of hope that they're going to do something. But one of the signs of a team that's not doing well is frustration. And we saw frustration from one of the best receivers in the NFL this weekend when Jamar Chase spat on Jalen Ramsey. Ramsey ends up punching him. Ramsey gets ejected. Chase is good to go, but it became quickly picked up by the Twitter sphere and everything, as you guys will see here on screen. Not a great look when you have two stars going at each other and one of them visibly spits on it and does not get caught. What do you make of this? Chase is getting suspended, right?
as you said, this was frustration mounting throughout this game, and we don't know what's said between players throughout the course of a game, right? We don't really get much of the mic'd up access throughout all of this, but this was a game where the Bengals fell behind early, never really came close to getting back, and Jamar Chase in this game finished with 10 targets, but only 3 catches for 30 yards. Obviously, not what he wants for his stat line or for the organization as a team, especially when earlier in the week they announced that Joe Burrow was returning to practice 2 months earlier than anticipated when it comes to his recovery timeline. But this is what happened here. And you got to go back to week 1 of the NFL season. Before a snap was even played, Jalen Carter spat at Dak Prescott. And of course, we know he was ejected from that game. And the NFL essentially ruled that that game served as a suspension. Since that happened before any football was played, they're like, hey, that's your suspension, and that's it. This Jamar Chase incident, which after the game, Jalen Ramsey said the spinning happened. Jamar Chase said the spinning did not happen. Of course, there's videos everywhere. There's cameras everywhere. Here you see it on the screen once again. It's pretty clear. So if the NFL goes by the protocol and the history of this type of a situation, this happened in the fourth quarter. So a bunch of the game has already happened. So what I would expect to happen here this week is they're going to talk. I mean, that angle right there that you just showed there, Ben, is probably the most clearest one that you're going to get of the spinning happened over here. So the NFL is going to talk to all the parties involved over here. And eventually, I would expect by either today or Tuesday for there to be some sort of a ruling here. I could see Jamar appealing it. But if we go by the history here, Jamar is bound to be suspended over here for one game. And that game is going to be next week versus the New England Patriots, who, of course, have a mini bye week here, are 9-2, leading the AFC East. That would be a welcome gift for them over here, and probably a welcome gift for Christian Gonzalez as well, their top corner. So that is what I expect to happen over here this week. And like you said, Ben, they're now 3-7 on the year. The idea of Joe Burrow coming back definitely brought some juice in the building, some excitement in the building. The fan base got excited. But when you go back to think about the loss versus the Jets, the loss versus the Bears, 2 games that they probably should have won, and of course they didn't. This entire idea of Joe Burrow rushing back, especially if the losses continue to mount and the Ravens won on Sunday, the Steelers won on Sunday, the division is losing hope over here. Joe Burrow said last week, the only path to making the playoffs is winning the division. And it's slowly but surely falling away from them over here after this loss, and now Jamar Chase likely getting suspended again. We'll get word over here in the coming days, but it's been a bad few days here for Cincinnati.
Yeah, and like you said, not only just the Patriots coming up, but Patriots, Ravens, Bills, Ravens. So we know that that timeline would align with the 21-day practice window that was opened up for Burrow. He would be coming back against the Ravens. It's just it doesn't seem like a situation that would be particularly wise to bring back a quarterback that has dealt with injuries throughout his career, has missed significant time, and it just seems like all the vibes, all the juju, everything's kind of just going down the drain right now with the Bengals. What do you think this means for Zach Taylor right now? Because he's somebody that I think is, you know, he's got to be on some sort of seat, right?
I've put Zach Taylor on hot seats before, and I guess he's been, I don't want to call it lucky, but the fact that Joe Burrow gets hurt every other year kind of gives him an extra life over here every single time. So I guess you could say he had that again over here. It was his decision to move on from Lou Anarumo. It was his decision to bring in Al Golden, and the defense has gotten even worse than where it was last year. But like everyone has told me in the coaching industry, the executive industry, all the agents involved, the Bengals are just not an organization that likes having dead money, especially on the coaching side. So I don't expect anything to happen there. I mean, they would have to have a just complete bundle up over here the rest of the year. The players giving up, like I don't even players are giving up. Like they're playing hard. It just, there's talent that's not there, especially on the defensive side. And then when you lose Joe Burrow, and Joe Flacco's done a fine job, but still, it's not been the situation that Taylor expected to have this year. But definitely frustration is getting very, very significant there, especially after what Jamar Chase did here on Sunday. Luckily for him, the refs didn't see it in game, but again, the cameras are there, and I think something's going to happen here in the coming days.
Yeah, and then just to say that you didn't do it, it's cameras everywhere, cameras everywhere.
Caught in
Um,
4K, as they say.
yeah, exactly. A lot of stuff like you hinted at going on here in the NFL on Sunday. What kind of stood out to you? Like, what's on your mind after the eventful slate of games that we had on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to start with what I mentioned in the beginning here, the AFC West and how it's all unfolding right now, and especially with the Kansas City Chiefs, with the Broncos again winning now 9-2, and they have a very unique way of winning. They play their brand of football. Their defense is outstanding, and the offense does just enough when it matters most. But I look at the Chiefs right now; they are currently 5-5 on the year. They're 500 here after 11 weeks of the NFL season, which sounds crazy to say for a team that has made the Super Bowl in each of the last 3 years. They're currently third in the AFC West. They are ninth in the conference, so they would not even be in the playoff picture right now if the season ended today. And the current three AFC wildcard teams, as of right now, are the Buffalo Bills, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Los Angeles Chargers, which those three teams, if you look at the schedule so far this year, have all beaten the Kansas City Chiefs. So if there was a tiebreaker scenario at some point here this year, that tiebreaker right now is going to those teams. So the Chiefs have a bit of an uphill battle over here to make the playoffs. I mean, I think the division right now, they're 3 games behind the Denver Broncos. Like we're talking about a legit uphill battle over here. And I think the team has a lot of talent. Like we've seen them in games versus tough teams come out there and put a dominant performance like they did in the Sunday night game versus the Detroit Lions, but it has not come fully together. When you look at the rest of the schedule here, because now going into week 12, this is when you start looking at the schedules and like try to project what's going to happen moving forward here. The Colts come up next week off a bye. The Colts, who have been one of the best teams in football, coming off a bye. Then you have the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Then you have the Houston Texans, who I would imagine, would have CJ Stroud back by then. They're now winning over here. They're 5-5 as well. The Chargers, who are banged up completely, they have a bye coming up as well. Then you have the Titans. That should be a win, probably. Then you end the year with the Broncos again, and then the Raiders. I mean, I think there are just two surefire wins here. That's the Raiders in week 18 and the Titans in week 16. Every other game there, I mean, I think it could go either way. So I think the way the year ends over here for the Chiefs, these remaining games, is so interesting to me because there is a real scenario where the Chiefs are out of the playoffs, which I think is a crazy thing that nobody expected to see over here. And that's probably one of the things over here that I'm really paying attention to. I mean, Ben, did you ever think that by going into week 12, we would be in a world where we're talking about the Chiefs as ninth in the AFC right now?
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre to think about, and while it's concerning, that they're sitting there at 5-5, it is worth mentioning that, the teams that are also there in that mix with them, the Baltimore Ravens 5-5, the Houston Texans 5-5, and then you have the Jaguars, which of course they just absolutely demolished the Chargers, and I think we'll get to that in a minute, but 6-4. The Chiefs of the teams that are not currently in the playoffs are plus 10 in touchdowns on the season, which actually puts them ahead of teams like the Jaguars, the Chargers, and the Steelers that are in the playoffs, and only one behind the New England Patriots. It's an interesting way of looking at it that it's like when the Chiefs have been good, they've been good. But when they're in these close games and stuff, they just seem to find themselves on the wrong side of things, right? That's why you have that, the one score game stat. What is it, 0-5 this year in one score games?
0-5 this year after being 11-0 last year, after ending the season last year having 17 consecutive wins of one score possession game dating back to 2023. So it is completely flipped. It's very reminiscent to when the Minnesota Vikings that one year had a crazy record in one possession games. And the next year, they didn't even make the playoffs when, again, it all just flopped. That's what it's feeling like right now with the Chiefs, where last year they had the week one Isaiah Likely's toe is out of bounds and the blocked field goal versus the Broncos and the Aiden O'Connell fumble. Like that
No.
stuff is not going their way this year. And now, like we said, they're 5-5. Like you mentioned, those three teams in the wild card spot. Like I said before, those three teams have the tiebreaker right now. So that element of it, like they have to go out there and have a better
You got to
record
make
than
up
those
two
teams.
games now, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the part of it that's so interesting. Like, they don't really have much wiggle room here to lose many games the rest of the year because of all those losses. So, I think everyone is still like living in a world like, yeah, they'll be fine. They'll make the playoffs. And then once the playoffs get here, Pouch will do his thing. But getting in the playoffs in the first place right now is going to be an uphill battle. I think it's going to be one of the storylines to watch here the rest of the year.
Yeah, and just kind of looking at the road ahead for the Kansas City Chiefs and really putting it into perspective for those of you watching here along on YouTube, you can get a little taste of what we've got going on here for their upcoming schedule. I mean, not great, right? Indianapolis Colts being the next team you're going to have to face. Cowboys, the defense isn't there. Texans, that's a so-so team. Chargers, it's a good team ahead of them right now. Titans, not great. You have the Broncos again, and then you do have the Raiders, who seem to just be a team that, you demolish them earlier in the season, but occasionally have those games against the Chiefs where they just make it interesting. Like, it's by no means a cakewalk the rest of the way. It's definitely the harder games I would imagine are out of the way, but the Indianapolis Colts are, you know, they're one of the top teams for a reason right now.
Just think about it for a second. This week in the NFL, Broncos won, Patriots won, Colts on a bye, Steelers won, Bills won, Chargers lost, Jaguars won, Texans won, Ravens won, Chiefs lost. So every team you need to lose won this week. And of course, they losing as well is it's going to be interesting to watch the rest of the year with this team over here, the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's probably like the one thing that stood out to me the most in all these games of the year. Just I think it's time to wake up over here and realize like there is a scenario where they might not make it. And if they do make it, I think they'll have a lot of momentum going into the playoffs, which is when the Chiefs are the most scariest. It's kind of reminiscent to the Bengals last year trying to make that run. Like everyone's like, you do not want to face that team if they make it. Of course, they didn't make it. So that would be the Chiefs this year if they do make it. But they got to start winning some games over here. And next week, it's a 1 o'clock Eastern game versus the Colts. Should be a really good game. The next thing over here I want to bring up over here, Ben, is the Jaguars and Chargers game, which didn't really get much attention in that 1 o'clock window. It was the only true blowout game in that 1 o'clock window. Every other game at one point was a one possession game. This game was over from the beginning. I want to give credit to the Jaguars here because for them, after last week's embarrassing, pathetic, really tough loss where they had that 19-point lead versus the Texans in the fourth quarter, and Davis Mills of all people is out here leading the team back. That could have easily been what the Giants had versus the Broncos when they had that 19-point fourth quarter lead and they blew it. And ever since then, the Giants have not won a single game. That could have been the Jaguars, and they did not let that happen. that is a kudos to the entire coaching staff from Liam Cohen to Grant Udinsky to Anthony Campanelli to the players as well, who really took the messaging throughout the week and really went out there, put that behind them, and went in there and won 35-6. This was the first time the Chargers were back in Jacksonville since that wild card game where they blew a 27-0 lead. There were, Justin Herbert was there, Khalil Mack was there, Zion Johnson was there. Like all these players throughout the course of the week were like, yeah, we're coming back there, trying to get the sour taste out of our mouth. As soon as the game started, the craziest thing to me is I have never seen a Jim Harbaugh led team get out physical the way the Jaguars did in this game. The Jaguars had 30 first downs in this game. They had 192 rushing yards to the Jaguars for to the Chargers 42 rushing yards in this game. And when you look at time of possession, the Jaguars had the ball for 38 minutes. The Chargers had it for just 22 minutes in this game. I have never seen the trenches be so dominant against a Jim Harbaugh led team. I know they've had injuries, but this is one of those games I've never seen before. And really, it's the Chargers have a bye coming up, but they can never fall behind in games anymore because if they do, they just cannot hold up anymore with this offensive line. No Rashawn Slater, no Joe Alt, both of them out for the year. When it gets the situation where the teams know that they're going to be throwing the ball, Justin Herbert has no time at all. He took 3 or 4 sacks in this game. There was a roughing the passer call where he got completely obliterated. He had a concussion check in this game. I actually really think about Justin Herbert for the rest of this year and if he can make it out healthy the rest of the year, because it feels like he's been dealing with a bunch of different things. This offensive line is not helping him. They're losing in the trenches. And currently, like we said before, the Chargers have a wild card spot. They need a bye week this week. It's perfect timing, mentally, physically, everything. But I do worry a little bit about this Chargers team moving forward because that offensive line, it is horrible. They traded for Trevor Penning before the trade deadline. He started left tackle in this game did not really work out. So there are a lot of questions about this Chargers team, but I cannot say enough about the Jaguars and how impressed I was that they were able to do this to a team like the Chargers, considering the loss that they had last week.
Well, maybe that's the opportunity for the Chiefs then, right? If the Chargers keep going downhill right now because of their offensive line issues.
Exactly. I mean, that definitely helps. But again, there are a bunch of teams above them. So that is part of it. So Chiefs have the Chargers one more time in a few weeks. But again, the Jaguars, team that won, they're above them as well. Couple other things I want to bring up here. The game of the week on paper, Ben, was the game in your hometown, the Rams and the Seahawks. Um, Rams once again win. They're 8-2 on the year now. And this was more of a defensive performance over here. Matthew Stafford had his 2 touchdowns, but he was held, I believe, under 150 yards in this game. This was all about the defense, who had 4 interceptions of Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold remembers these Rams really well from last year in the wild card game where he got obliterated in that game as well with all the pressure. The defensive line had no sacks in this game. Right? When you see that, you think, oh, they were not getting to the quarterback. They were getting to the quarterback. They were wrecking havoc. And as Sean McVay said after the game, stats are for losers because if you just look at the stat sheet and see 0 sacks, you think the defense line was not working all game. They were. The secondary had 4 interceptions, 2 of them by Cam Kitchens. Kobe Durant had one. They were all over Sam Darnold throughout this game. And it's pretty crazy because got to give credit to the Seahawks, who also in this game were 7-2 coming in. They kept this a game throughout. Their defense has been excellent all year. The Mike McDonald led defense, they kept them in the game. I mean, Matthew Stafford, who I still think is the MVP favorite to me right now, he did not have a typical Matthew Stafford performance over here in this game, even though he had 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. The Seahawks did a really, really good job on him throughout the course of this game, to the point the Rams had an excellent special teams day as well. They had a 99. They had a punt in the final minute and a half, which was probably the most perfect punt I've seen all year. The Seahawks were pinned in the 1 yard line, and still it got to a point where the Seahawks had a chance at a 61-yard game winning field goal for Jason Myers, who his NFL record in his career is 61 yards. It was in SoFi Field. So they actually really had a shot in this game, but the kick was well to the right, I believe, and it was short, and that was that. But the Rams right now, think about this. They are now 8-2 on the year. They have a top two seed in the NFC. This is pending right now, the Eagles Lions game, which we're recording in middle of that game. If the Eagles lose that game, then it would be Rams number one seed. But think about it for a second. Top two seed, and they have a top 10 pick in the NFL draft because the Atlanta Falcons once again lost on Sunday to the Carolina Panthers. So everything is going the right way right now for the LA Rams, who are cruising right now in the NFL.
Love it. Love it to see an LA team doing well after we just talked about the Chargers doing poorly. Just kidding. They're both doing well. It's fun to get some football out here, even if the stadium is very heavy of other teams. Speaking of other teams, let's touch on one more game that was between some NFC contenders, right? That's one other team that you've got, one other game you've got on your mind.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to talk about the Bears and Vikings game, which also came up over here. That was the early window game, which also went down to the wire. Um, it almost was a shades of week one of JJ McCarthy being terrible for the first three quarters and then waking up in the fourth quarter. And they actually did take the lead of here late in this game. But once again, the Bears, like they've been doing all year long, ever since they started 0-2, a switch has been flipped over here, and they once again, this time thanks to special teams, Devin Duvernay with a big kick return, Josh Blackwell, former guest on the show, with a big block opening it all up for him. That sets them up. They get some yards from DeAndre Swift and eventually a game winning field goal by Cairo Santos to win. That is now the fifth game winning drive for Caleb Williams. Obviously, this was not necessarily much of a Caleb game winning drive, but it does go under his portfolio, I guess. But that is now his fifth of the year. They've become the comeback kings in the NFL so far this year. Caleb now actually has seven in his young career. That ties the most ever for a quarterback in his first 2 years in the NFL. And for me, it's just the Bears. It's a different identity. It's a different culture. Ben Johnson, those locker room videos that we always looked forward to, the Dan Campbell locker room videos. I think Ben Johnson has overtaken him as the number one locker room video guy right now with the way the team is responding to him and the belief that they're never out of it. Like some of these games, I think about, the Bengals game, I think about this game, like you feel like the opposing team scored a touchdown late in the game with under a minute left, it's over. And these players, Caleb Williams especially, believe that it's not and they could do something. And it's really all three phases. I mean, offensively, you definitely see glimpses. Defensively, they're top of the NFL in turnovers, and then special teams has really come together on all the fronts, from the kicking game, the punting game, kick return, punt return, blocking kicks. Like they've done it all so far this year. So it's been really fun to watch the Bears and how they've done it all. And again, we're recording this during Sunday Night Football. If the Lions lose, the Bears will have sole possession of first place in the NFC North, which everyone talked about the Lions before the year. Everyone talked about the Packers before the year, myself included, with the Micah Parsons trade. And even people talked about the Vikings as well, who are now in fourth place in the division. Not many people thought it would be a turnaround like this in year one of the Caleb Williams, Ben Johnson era. They're doing it. It's been fun to watch, and they're never out of it, which is really cool. On the flip side, I think there has to be a discussion on JJ McCarthy here because the Vikings and what they did this past offseason of moving on from Sam Darnold, and they tried to retain Daniel Jones, but Daniel Jones had a better chance at starting in Indianapolis, and he went there. And they were like, you know what? We're going to put all our eggs in the JJ McCarthy basket. We're not going to pursue Aaron Rodgers. We're going to sign Sam Howell to be the backup. Then you trade away Sam Howell. You bring in Carson Wentz. This is going to be our quarterback room for this year. And at some point, you have to start wondering if JJ McCarthy is truly going to be the guy. And the reason I say that, I know it's really early. He's had only a handful of starts in his career, but you look at what the rest of the draft class has done so far, from Caleb Williams in Chicago, Jaden Daniels last year in Washington, Drake May right now in New England, Bo Nix in Denver. JJ McCarthy probably had the best situation of all those quarterbacks, when it came to their roster, when it came to wide receiver Justin Jefferson, running back Aaron Jones, tight end TJ Hawkinson, bookend tackles of Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw. And then most importantly, the defense led by Brian Flores with all those great players. And the head coach and Kevin O'Connell has made it work with quite literally every quarterback he's been with, from Darnold, from Kirk Cousins, from Nick Mullins to Josh Dobbs to all these different quarterbacks he's been around. He has made it work, whether it's one game, 2 games, a full season, whatever it is. And we just have not seen it consistently at all. I mean, it's really been just those two fourth quarters versus the Bears where he kind of woke up, but the rest of it has been kind of meh. And I don't really know, when you have this much talent and you have this type of coaching with all those brilliant coaches on that staff, from Kevin O'Connell to Josh McCown to Wes Phillips to a few other guys on that staff. I mean, Greg Udinski was on the staff last year. Like, there are a lot of brilliant offensive minds on the staff. And in this game, McCarthy was 16 of 32, 150 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. And it's not like the Bears were throwing the kitchen house at him. I mean, the deep balls were falling short. The checkdowns were coming in way too, on fire, way too hot. It was just, when you watch it, it just doesn't look good. And there were points in this game. The Fox camera crew did a good job of capturing it all. Justin Jefferson, who is pretty cool, calm, and collected, is starting to get frustrated. I mean, you could see he's not happy. He's ready to toss his helmet. And it was earlier this week when Justin Jefferson was asked about the 3-year anniversary of his crazy catch in Buffalo, in that pass from Kirk Cousins on fourth down, the game where they beat the Bills, in Buffalo. That was the Kirk O'Chains game on the plane, all that. He was asked about that moment, and he was like, "Hey, I got to get back to being Justin Jefferson of that year, Offensive Player of the Year. I got to be back at that." And he can do it if this is the quarterback play he's going to have. So JJ is the quarterback for the rest of the year. There is no competition behind him. I mean, you have Max Brosmer there, and I think Brent Rippon's on the roster, I believe, but Carson Wentz is out for the year. Like, there is nobody behind him to take over the job. But after this year, if this doesn't improve, I wonder what the conversation becomes in that Vikings front office and coaching staff. Do you bring in somebody else to compete with him, like the Colts did with Anthony Richardson? I think all of that is on the table here, because you look at the division, the Packers are going nowhere. The Bears are going nowhere. The Lions are going nowhere. You need to have better quarterback play than this. And what we've seen over here through all of his starts, it's just not good enough.
It's almost like they could use like a Daniel Jones type, right?
They had 2 guys in their building, and again, I mean, I just want to give the backstory here because I think the context is important. They wanted Sam Darnold, they didn't wanna go that far. They wanted Daniel Jones, and from my knowledge, the offer was similar or might have even been better from Minnesota, but I think Daniel and his people were aware of the situation where it's like, Anthony Richardson has gotten his chance in Indianapolis. The fans, as soon as he gets another chance and he doesn't play well, they're gonna be calling for somebody else. JJ never really had a chance in Minnesota, so they knew his leash would be longer. So that is why Daniel went to Indianapolis. The offers were the same, or might have been even better in Minnesota side. But that's the context behind all of it. But JJ has just not been he's just not been in so far. And that's been a real issue. When you have a roster, Ben, that consists of those players. I mean, think about the defensive players on this team, from Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel and Blake Cashman and Byron Murphy and Josh Metellus. Like, all these guys are holding opposing offenses to limited amount of points every single game. When that happens, you expect to win the game. And so far, with all the talent they have on offense, they're not scoring, and it's been extremely inconsistent. And I think at some point that conversation will start in that front office, if it has not yet, if the losing continues and this is the way the team is playing.
We'll have to keep an eye on it. I think that's is that all that's on your mind right now, Ari?
For the most part, I mean, that there was so much here that happened throughout the course of the week. I mean, we spoke about the Atlanta Falcons before and how their first round pick right now is with the Rams. I have a bit of a watch right now on Raheem Morris, Terry Fontenot. I mean, you cannot be losing this many games in a row, especially whenever you've invested this much on so many different players. Offensively, I mean, we're looking at a situation right now where Michael Penix could miss some time, Drake London might miss some time. You don't have that first round pick. And I went back just to check, And I think Raheem Morris is a really good defensive-minded coach. I think he's a really good leader type of a guy. But I went back to check some of the people they interviewed a couple years ago. Ben, let's see if you remember. Do you remember who they interviewed a couple years ago?
Bill Belichick.
Bill Belichick is one. Do you remember anybody else?
I really remember it being those 2. Was 2 years ago. Was that McCarthy in that as well?
McCarthy was not there. So their
Oh, because that
list
was the year
that
before. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry,
all
sorry.
right.
That was just last year.
So their list was crazy good. I mean, they had Bill Belichick. Okay, fine. Jim Harbaugh was there. They had Mike
Oh,
Vrabel on there. Mike
oh.
Vrabel interview there. They had Mike McDonald on there, who ended up going to Seattle. Um, and eventually they decided to stick with the guy who they had on their staff a couple years before, I think was fired, if I'm not mistaken, but Raheem Morris ended up getting the job. Again, I'm not saying Raheem Morris is a bad coach. I just think things are not going their way right now. But when you look at that, it's a bit of a yikes. And that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, I remember that now. It was so funny. It was such a heavy, like, "Oh, it's gonna be Belichick," and then he didn't even get, what, like, the 2nd interview or whatever, but, ugh, that's,
Mike Vrabel did not get a job that year. His son,
yeah,
um, I think Carter Vrabel or Tyler, one of them,
yeah.
actually was on their practice squad for a little bit, so there was some organizational familiarity there, uh, but they passed on all of them, and part of it was, by the way, because they retained GM, but only fired head coach, which is what the Giants are going through right now, and this is what happens when like, this stuff, I think it's important to bring it up because they really did a legit search there, and it was Rich McKay, and it was Terry Fontenot, and it was Arthur Blank, and they ended up on the guy they used to have there, and that was Raheem Morris. And I don't think they were expecting this type of a star right now, losing 4 or 5 in a row. And when you have a former number 8 overall pick, 9 overall pick quarterback, and Bijan Robinson top 10 pick, and Drake London top 10 pick, and Kyle Pitts number 4 overall, and an offensive line that is basically made up of first and second round picks, and a defense that you have a Jalen Walker and a James Pierce who have definitely flashed, but you traded a future first round pick to get both of them. I don't think you're supposed to have this record, and that's a bit of an issue.
Yeah, 5 straight losses for the Falcons right now. They've allowed 30 plus points in 3 of their last 4 games. Their last 3 losses have all been by 1 score, but like you said, not a good thing if, Penix is going to be a little beat up there, as well as Kirk Cousins, when he made his start, not particularly sharp.
Oh, yeah. I didn't mention that, by the way. That was this
Yeah.
regime as well, with Raheem giving that contract. So,
Right,
yeah, not
right.
great.
Well, if that's it, Ari, I think all we got to do is tell the people go out there, hit subscribe. We're still pumping out a lot of content throughout the season right now. Even if your team is out, you need to be listening along because we're going to be giving you guys all the stories, all the content from around the NFL. Help build that story of what your team's going to be going into the offseason because every little thing that happens in the NFL has a ripple effect. And that's why we have Mr. Ari Meirov in our lives.
I'm officially getting into off-season mode a little bit over here, preparing with all these teams who are officially out of it, looking ahead. So we're going to be covering all that here on the show as well in the coming days and weeks. Because if you're a fan of some of these teams, I know you're already thinking about the offseason. So we have you covered as well. But that would do it here for our Monday, November 17th edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. Stay tuned over here for more announcements on the show, guests on the show, and all these different things. And we will see all of you here tomorrow on NFL Spotlight.